As a kid growing up with the 90s FPS classics, I've almost forgotten how I liked the genre in recent years. Not that the linear cinematic shooters aren't enjoyable, nor is that there were no great titles in the past few decades, but overall the FPS genre became very different and some might say far less exciting, at least mechanically as a result. It's unsurprising that a wave of titles trying to recapture the best ideas of FPSs of old started a few years ago. What is surprising is how quickly we have gotten to something as close to perfection as DUSK. DUSK is essentially a mix of ID tech approach to FPS, most notably the original Quake, and the build engine approach to FPS, namely Blood. And it would have been great if it just managed to combine those two games into one in a commendable way, but instead DUSK evolves best ideas from both, combining them with some newer concepts like crouch slides and levels with geometry and features impossible to create in the 90s, discards all the worst parts and creates something absolutely amazing. The levels are great and are designed to constantly subvert expectations, drawing inspiration from both classic FPS games and previous experiments of David Szymanski, often introducing one-off cool central ideas and then discarding them from some other cool and novel ideas. 3-game episodes don't suffer from the old shareware days problem of having the best, most memorable levels in episode 1 either. Same goes for the selection of weapons and enemies, pretty much none of them ever feel redundant or overwhelming in their variety, creating a wonderful balance of fun. The music is absolutely fantastic, the visuals are wonderfully stylized yet perfectly functional, the speed, the flow, the horror mood, the variety, everything is just as close to perfect as I could ever imagine, feeling like what you would think about the classic FPS titles with your, rose-tinted glasses on, but without all the little annoyances that actually exist in them. With how amazing and exciting the game is, it's hard to pick on the elements that disappointed me even a bit, but I suppose what struck me as somewhat odd was the switch in how very distinct in their style the levels of episode 1 were, and how far more abstract in style they become in later episodes. This even has a narrative explanation to it, yet with how stellar and amazing levels are, they do become somewhat muddied in terms of visual identity by the end of the game. Given that it's hard to point out even little questionable things, it's even harder to say if there were any big annoyances. To me personally, the closing fights of the game were not particularly enjoyable, but that just because I was never a huge fan of extended long FPS battles with a lot of enemies, like what you'd often see in Serious Sam games. To me, it simply gets stale a bit too quickly. Especially since there are a few enemy types in the game that I found to have just a bit too much HP to deal with, even if the overall arena fight was well designed. But really, DUSK is simply too exciting to play. It's so fun, so creative with its classic and new ideas, so fresh yet so pleasantly familiar that thinking about it in parts for easy analysis and digestion is hard. When I think of DUSK right now, my brain explodes in excited exclamations, sometimes with expletives of extreme approval for good measure, and I feel compelled to recommend the game to anyone who is even remotely interested in FPS titles. And any new titles in a genre, whenever they will be going for the same retro feel or something recent and cinematic, will have things to learn from DUSK.